Yeah, no. So I know I look like I'm 12, or 19, but I'm 29. I'm just aging very well. And so forgive me. I'm very grateful to DeForest Kelley for inventing this line. I'm a doctor. I'm not a technocrat, and I'm not a recording artist, and I'm not any of these other things. So I'm very good at giving medical advice, but sometimes technological stuff is a bit beyond me. So and sometimes projecting my voice is a bit difficult for me. So if anyone has trouble, just please wave at me, and I'll increase the volume. I need to use this thing because I can never use these when they're pinned to my shirt. So I need to use this like a little tiny microphone. So a little bit about me. Undergraduate at University of Calgary. I went to the Canadian College of Naturopathic Medicine in Toronto for 4 years, and then moved back home because my family's here and my mom's here, and all of my friends are here, and I really love Calgary. I mean, after going to that talk we just had, I'm like, wow, Calgary's even awesomer than I thought it was. As Norma mentioned, yes, my dad was a teacher. A couple of you have come up to me and told me how familiar I look. Because my dad, I don't know if you do my dad was Rick Terrio. He was the economic negotiator for the ATA during the later Klein years. So, the later Klein, he's the one who got you at least some of your benefits back from Klein. God rest that man's drunken soul. It's funny. Anytime you want to impress a group of teachers, make a joke about Klein. But anyway, my father, as many of you know, some of you probably know me from when I was a screaming toddler running around ATA meetings. And many of you saw me speak at my dad's funeral. So my dad died in 2009 of stomach cancer. And it was very sad because Dad's whole life was kind of gearing up towards retiring and moving back to Miramichi and doing things that he wanted to do then. And he didn't get that chance because he died early. And that always made me really sad. And so a lot of my practice has kind of been developed devoted into getting people past that retirement age and making sure that they have long, full, healthy lives after their chosen line of work is kind of petered out. So that's really one of the big inspirations, is to kind of ensure that kind of thing never happens again. Because obviously that's a really terrible thing. Dad died at 53, and so forth. So the basic idea behind this is you want to have a high quality of life and live well. People are living longer and longer and longer these days, but we know statistically that the burden of chronic disease and the decrease in functionality, the decrease in the ability to do things for yourself and to have happy, satisfying, at least semi-independent lives, is also decreasing. So we're living longer, but we're living worse lives. This is not something that's inherent to human biology. If you look cross-culturally, this is where my degree in anthropology is very useful. If you look cross-culturally, this is actually something that's extraordinarily peculiar to Western societies. So my whole idea behind this is for us to get out of this mode of living in Western societies that is predisposing us to dementia, that is predisposing us to decreased loss of function, that is predisposing us to cancer, and get us back to a place where we can have excellent function until our very last, until our very last days. So, part of the idea behind living well is actually pretty hard to pin down. Does anyone have any ideas about what living well looks like for them? There's no wrong answers.
Lots of fun.
Lots of fun. I like that. Because if you're not having fun, what's the point? Anyone else?
Move and do what you want to do.
Move and do what you want to do. That is also excellent. Sorry? Good health, absolutely. You can't really do those other two things if you don't have at least an acceptable level of health. If you're not, I used to take care of disabled people, so I term that functionality. You can function in your day-to-day life. It's very important. So here's just a couple of things that I often associate with living well. We discussed them. Happiness, the same thing as fun. Functionality, a sense of purpose, that's really important. Community, having a group of friends, family members, or whatever else that makes you are embedded in, and that you have a network of social relationships. That's one of the best predictors of whether or not people live well after retirement. one of the most tragic things that I see occasionally is people who retire and their entire social network is at work. And their whole sense of purpose and meaning derives from work. And they're miserable at work. So they're kind of, oh, come on, you've all seen it. So there's that person's in a pretty bad situation. You're miserable at work, but then when you leave work, your sense of purpose and your social network are gone. Something you need to work out of. And lastly is a spiritual life. Spiritual life does not necessarily mean any particular religious connotation. It means, and I kind of link it to that sense of purpose in life and a sense of like where you belong, what you're trying to do here in your lifetime. So that's actually really quite important, and unfortunately very much neglected in much of medicine nowadays. Now, this is actually one part that I really am quite passionate about. So we have been told for a long time that our society is one of the most longest lived and healthiest in the history of the world. How many people think that's true? Yeah, no, it's not. It's not even remotely true. These societies are all ones where people routinely, quite often live to be over 100. At least they did pre-contact with European civilization. So the San, if anyone knows who they are, they used to call them the Bush people. They made that movie about them a few years ago, The Gods Must Be Crazy. They had an extraordinarily vibrant, healthy culture until contact. And then just in the last decade, the Botswanan governments moved them onto reserves and so forth, so that their game can be hunted for commercially by tourists. So they can't do their way of life anymore. They move them onto reserves, which is really quite tragic. So they're not doing so well anymore. The Okinawans are actually doing quite well. The Hunza are doing very well because the Hunza live in Pakistan and they live in the mountainous regions and they live far away from all the conflicts, so nobody can get to them. So they kind of live in a mountain valley and there's wars on every side, so nobody can really get to them. So they're doing wonderfully. The Abkhazians, I'm not sure. If anyone remembers, a couple of years ago, Russia seized parts of Georgia, and Abkhazia is one of the regions. Abkhazia is the one I know the most about. Abkhazians very much routinely live to be over 100. I think in some of the ethnography done on that culture, there was one man who claimed to be 167 years old, and the birth records in his village went back 150 years. And everyone said he's been living there forever. So at that point, I'm just willing to take his word. Maybe he's 165, but there's also another woman who claimed to be 138, and who's at the time of the ethnography in the 70s was still working at a Soviet collective farm. She gets prizes because of how hard she works. So, and none of these, they don't have the problems with dementia, with Alzheimer's, with loss of function. These people they are perfectly functional, and then when they die, 2 days, I'm out of here, gone, see ya. They'll get pneumonia and die extraordinarily quickly. So this is kind of, I think, the thing that we should aspire to. The big question, I don't think anybody would disagree with that. That's the kind of lifespan we want. Big question. How do we do that? Yeah. One of the big ones is social changes. In our society, particularly in economic debate right now, the big idea is productivity. Productivity. You're teachers, you guys get hammered about what you're doing, how much you're doing it, and how much time you put into everything. That really needs to change. The emphasis on productivity over quality of life is not serving anyone other than the people who are making money off of us in various contexts. I really do wish that all those predictions that people made in the 50s that we'd all be doing 3-hour workdays by now came true, because that would have been a much healthier quality of life for people. So that, and in addition to that, there's a great deal of issues around not just work, but around other priorities, like environmental ones. One of the dearest naturopaths, she's been in practice 30 years, just recently completed Dr. Walter Crinian out of Arizona's environmental medicine program, and she's been in practice 30 years, did a lot of psychiatric work, she's been around the block. Completed his program, went into 2.5-year clinical depression. Environmental medicine is just that horrifyingly bad right now. There's so much toxicity around that and that toxicity that's not even publicly acknowledged, that it's beginning to severely impact human health. mental health as well. Mental health is improving because we as a society are beginning to address okay, it's okay to get depressed, it's okay to be unhappy, there's things you can do about it, it's okay to have an illness like schizophrenia and so forth. That really needs to change as well because one of the bigger drags on a person's quality of life is their mental health. If you're not happy in your life, you're not going to be healthy physically, and your quality of life will not, and you're not going to be living terribly well. So those are things I generally leave to social activists. I talk about them when I get a chance, but I don't, harp on them too much. The big thing that I am, because I'm a naturopathic doctor, I focus on medicine. And quite a lot of the problems in living well are functions of the current medical paradigm that's predominant in our society. There's a lot of issues, particularly treatment. Diagnosis isn't as big of an issue, but prevention, screening, and early management of disease. Those are all very, very big things that need to be addressed if we're going to live healthfully as a society. So I'm going to explain why. In my mind, naturopathic medicine is the solution to all of this. That's why I decided to study it instead of going to regular medical school. All of those issues have a solution somewhere in naturopathic medicine. If you think about contemporary Western biomedicine, its big strength is diagnosis. It can diagnose almost anything, anywhere, with great accuracy. What happens after that? Treatment. I remember one of my friends who's a dermatologist spent months diagnosing the skin condition. What did she do after that? Cortisone motion. It's just, treatment is not that particularly well thought out of. They try really hard, but quite often treatment is just not that great. And I'll explain why in greater detail. Prevention is also a big issue. The basic cornerstone from an anthropological point of view of allopathic medicine, allopathic is what we would call conventional medicine. It's just kind of the way around its way to describe its ideology. The basic idea is the diagnosis and treatment of disease. That is why this paradigm has such a hard time with prevention, because if you don't have a diagnosis of disease, what do you do? If your whole idea is diagnosing and treating disease, that's quite challenging. Now, please don't think that I'm being overly critical of the conventional medical paradigm. They do lots of things really, really well. They are the masters of acute care. If you've got a pole sticking out of your chest or something, or you're going to die in 50, they are awesome. My sister's an allopathic nurse, and I hear all these miracles coming out of her, and she works in intensive care. I hear all these miracles that are coming out of intensive care. Chronic disease, not so great. So, how naturopathic medicine solves all these problems is through, it has a somewhat different idea of what constitutes health, and you've got a different idea about what constitutes health, you're going to approach it differently. So, in 2010, or 1996 was the first version of the paper, and the second version came out in 2010. There was a really important paper published by Jared Zeff and Pamela Snyder, who are very famous naturopaths who practice in Washington, or Washington State. And they created this thing called the therapeutic hierarchy. The therapeutic hierarchy was something that was kind of in the back of the minds of our minds in this profession for a very long time, but they made it very explicitly clear. So, the first of which is, these are the 6 steps. I'll explain them in greater detail. And I left out a slide. That's wonderful. So, the first of which is to create the environment for health. This is, I think, has been the goal of numerous activist movements for the past 150 years. In the earlier part of the century, they called it the hygiene movement. Hygiene, in the classical sense, meaning how to live well. Nowadays, we think of hygiene, we think whether somebody smells or not. But that wasn't the original meaning of the world. The original meaning was eating well, having a good, healthy environment, having a good working environment, having a good social environment. A great deal of the early suffragettes and so forth were all not practitioners, but patrons of naturopathic and homeopathic medicine, because that was so well emphasized. And quite often these physicians would lend their names to these causes just because they realize that unhealthy social environments and unhealthy work environments they're not conducive to health. So this first step is really, you could spend decades doing this step alone and get great results. It includes diet, it includes your lifestyle, it includes rest, it includes things going on in your family. I had one patient a couple of weeks ago. She was brilliant. She comes into for her first visit, and her problem is throat swelling. Like, she's having trouble swallowing. She gags a lot. She's had a bunch of ear, nose, throat investigations. It's nothing really particularly. They weren't able to diagnose everything. So we did some testing on her, and her big food intolerance was like apple family members, so like pears and peaches and cherries and apples and things like that. So we take her off that, which slowly goes down. But then she kind of starts telling me she's feeling a little bit funny. She's feeling a little bit anxious. So eventually we go and we talk for about an hour, and then we get and we'll discuss this in the next slide. But I go and I take her case and I prescribe her homeopathic to kind of see where she's stuck as a person in her development, and I prescribe a remedy that will unstick her in that developmental process. Comes in the next week telling me, Paul, I left my husband. I've known for about 10 years that he's cheating on me, and since I took that remedy, I just didn't want to deal with it anymore. So I drove up to this place where he was with this woman at 2:30 at night and knocked on the door and told her, hey, what you doing? And I'm leaving you right now. And I've seen it, and she did that. She wasn't able to do that for any part of her life. And since she was doing that, she started eating fruit again, and her throat didn't come back. Her throat swellings didn't come back. That throat swelling really was her body's way of dealing with this stress that she'd been having in her life for a decade. And since then, she's decided to reconcile with him, and they're working on their marriage, and it's quite lovely. But that remedy was kind of the catalyst for her to make her social environment a lot better, and call out her husband for having an affair. He denied doing it, of course, but it's very difficult for me to believe that you've got business at some other woman's home at 2:30 in the morning. Yeah, I'm sure you all. Yes.
Turn it up just a wee bit.
Okay, sorry. I'm sorry. That's probably okay. I will try to speak louder because I'm kind of a quiet person. So, creating the environment for health. Getting all aspects of your environment in such a way that health is possible. Do you understand that part? Excellent. The next part is what sets naturopathic medicine apart is to stimulate the self-healing ability of your body. In more modern physiological terms, we would call this stimulating the homeostatic response. Some of you used to be biology teachers. Remember homeostasis? Yeah. So homeostasis is just your body's inherent ability to keep itself in balance, to return itself from a disordered state to an ordered state. There's a number of ways you can do this. My 3 favorites. I do a lot of homeopathy. I know there's a lot of media buzz about it. It works really wonderfully, and there's some things that I can do with homeopathy that I don't think I can do with anything else. Acupuncture and hydrotherapy. So if anyone's curious, I think there's a session on acupuncture as well. Yeah, acupuncture is one of the best. I really like homeopathy just because I'm bizarrely good at it. Does anyone ever have a talent that they just can't explain? It's just, I tried this and I'm awesome at it. That's me in homeopathy. It usually takes 10 years to get good at it. It took me 2. It's really weird. And hydrotherapy, which is, I think it's one of the best therapies because almost everyone can do it. You don't need medical supervision to do it. It's really easy. Hydrotherapy, basically, alright, here's my instructions to do it. You know how you can get towels, and they roll them up in a little burrito shape, like in a hotel? You take 2 of those, put one of them in hot water, run it under the drain with hot water, usually in the bathtub, squeeze it out, then one with cold water, squeeze it out, and put the hot one on your chest, boobs to pubes. That's exactly how you should put it, boobs to pubes. Leave it on for 5 minutes, and you cover yourself up with a wool blanket while you're doing this. Leave it on for 5 minutes. Then you do the cold one for 10. And if it's hard to do this on yourself, but you've got a spouse or our roommate or a boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever, then have them do that same thing on your back. You can do that for any kind of like acute illnesses, and in combination with other treatment, it's really like you do that for months and months and months, and in combination with other treatment, it really does help your body kind of revitalize itself. The old school naturopaths a century ago would do that for months on people, and they'd be able to cure things like tuberculosis and everything else. It's really wonderful. So it takes a bit of getting used to. So remember, 5 minutes hot, 10 minutes cold. That is hydrotherapy. So next step after stimulating self-healing. Self-healing doesn't always do everything. There are times when self-healing in particular parts of the body lags behind. And in that case, you do your best to help that part of the body, pick up its steam. Quite often you'd use things like herbal medicine to just get rid of whatever toxicity that part of the body's holding on to. Quite often you use glandulars. Glandulars are basically just nutritional extracts of particular organs. Liver is one of my favorite. Like, I don't use liver as a glandular. Like, glandulars usually are pills, or supplements. But quite often I'll end up prescribing people to eat organic liver. Oh, excuse me. I'll end up prescribing people organic liver just because it is such a nutritional powerhouse. So how many of you remember your parents and grandparents forcing you to eat liver when you were a kid?
Yes.
It's a very good reason. Liver is excellent for you. So but if there's one meat you really want to buy organic, it's liver. So yeah. And lastly, there are specific nutrients. So we'll go into that a little bit more detail later. Fourth step is structural integrity. Quite often people who have large amounts of musculoskeletal pain, not every single time, quite often structural or musculoskeletal pain stems from internal dysfunction. The body's internal organs aren't working properly, and so it transmits it through a number of mechanisms to the external body. Quite often, chronic musculoskeletal pain just stems from those internal dysfunctions. Get rid of the internal dysfunctions, and all of a sudden those chiropractic adjustments start holding, or your massage therapist doesn't need to see you as often, and so forth. So these are things, some naturopaths do these. I tend to refer, just because I work in if you see that logo at the bottom left, that's Optimum. It's a chiropractic company, and I work with them, and so I tend to refer for a lot of that, just because that's not my area of expertise. So afterwards, there's 2 more steps. And both of those steps involve directly addressing pathology. Sometimes you do these things and a person's problems don't go away completely. And in that case, you are going to use specific substances to make sure that their disease doesn't overwhelm them or deteriorate any further. In Alberta, quite often I'll refer for this, but in British Columbia, naturopathic doctors have full prescribing rights. I think we can do, at least, don't quote me on this, but I think we can do almost everything except chemo and opiates and 1 or 2 psychiatric drugs. So if I was in British Columbia, I'd probably end up prescribing things like that on my own. In Alberta, I have to refer. So that's kind of it. So we do that as well.
What did you say, Bowen?
Bowen? Oh, Bowen is one of the musculoskeletal therapy. It's quite a wonderful one. So it's basically musculoskeletal. So I took one course in Bowen and I really suck at it. But I'm going to be honest with you all, there's things I'm not good at. But even when I do try it just briefly, I get amazing results. And so I think to myself, oh my God, if I'm terrible at this and I get amazing results, how good results of someone who's good are they going to get? So Bowen is, they basically take a muscle, stretch it, and then release it, and then leave you be for a couple of minutes. And it's a really excellent therapy that way.
Before we go on, what is the big difference between physiotherapy and osteopathy?
Physiotherapy tends to use a lot more muscle strengthening exercises, like that's their big thing is muscles. Osteopathy does do muscles, but quite often they'll do internal organs. They also do skulls as well. Like I know anatomically that skulls don't, like the bones in your skull don't move. They are doing something incredible if the bones, it works really, really well. I had one patient who had this thing called pseudotumor cerebri, which is a very strange disease. You've got all the symptoms of a brain tumor, but you don't have a brain tumor. So I sent her to an osteopathic person who worked on her skull a lot. Gone. So in that case, I suspect it's just her bones were not aligned properly, the cerebrospinal fluid wasn't draining, and pressure. So that's N of one case study, but still that was quite convincing. Like, they're doing something.
Who practices the bone therapy?
I think you could just do, a lot of massage therapists do it, so you can just go Google bone therapy Calgary and people will come up. I don't know the network right now, it's off the top of my head. So, my apologies about that. So, after describing what naturopathic doctors do, I'm sure it's intellectually interesting, but most of you are like, I don't care, what is this going to do for me? This is actually, within this framework, so much is possible. When those 4 steps, and eventually 5 and 6 steps are followed, you can do, about a good number of your health conditions will become much less severe and much more manageable. When your vital force is stimulated, when you're living in an environment that supports health, when whatever weaknesses you have, either through genetics or through injuries, are taken care of, and when your structural integrity is addressed, almost everything falls into place. That really is that kind of living well moment. It was really interesting reading the ethnographies of those people in Abkhazia, and they were telling the people who were doing the ethnography why they think they live so long and what their lives were like. That was the big steps that they emphasized. I go and take some time out and meditate every day, or I go and I just have so much fun watching my great-great-great-grandchildren, or I get a lot of meaning out of the work I do. Like the one woman who's not even 37, she was a die-hard communist. She loved working on the Soviet collective farm. She thought she was just crushing capitalism by going and picking tomatoes, and which is wonderful for her. That was really that kept her going for a very long time. So it's not my place to judge people's political beliefs that way. So once that intervention is those 4 steps are in place, there's a lot of additional things you can do as well to specifically deal with the aging process. So this is kind of one of my areas of things that I've been interested in since I started practice, and I really enjoy that. So first of which, I'm just going to pretend that you all are in perfectly healthy environments and your vitality is stimulated and everything. You're all doing hydrotherapy every day. You all spend 5 minutes a day to meditate and everything. So we're going to pretend that that's all the case. Diet. And I suppose this falls under creating a healthy environment. Diet is a very personalized thing. Different people need different things. Different people can eat different things that other people can't eat. A couple of you probably saw me eyeing all those nice sugary goodies outside. I love sugar so much, but I just cannot have it. I become kind of like one of those ADD kids when I have sugar. I've just not been able to get a way around that. So some of you probably don't have a problem with it. So that's fine. But there's some things that almost everyone shouldn't eat. Gluten is one of them. So there's a great deal going on about gluten right now. I do actually, if any of you go to my YouTube channel, I have a talk, about an hour and a half talk I gave on living gluten-free. It's not actually that difficult. And there's a really good book out right now, and I do recommend it. It irritates me that it wasn't by a naturopathic doctor, but it's called Wheat Belly. It's by a medical doctor. I forget his name right now, but it's Wheat Belly.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I know most of you heard of it. It irritates me that he's not a naturopathic doctor, but it's still a good book. So gluten, long story short, seems to inflame your immune system quite a bit, and seems to just really mess it up quite heavily. I go into that in great detail. I could spend the rest of the talk just scratching the surface of why gluten is nasty. But there's 3 pretty easy things you can do in order to get gluten out of your life. So the first of which is, instead of regular bread, do Ezekiel bread. And if anyone knows, if anyone goes to Superstore, Ezekiel bread is in the natural products section, and it's in the freezer section. It's frozen. They have a lot of sprouted grain breads and stuff that they just have with the regular bread. Don't buy that. Don't buy that. It needs to be frozen. If it's with the regular bread, it's basically they've thrown in a tiny bit of sprouted grain flour in with the regular flour, so there's no point. The second of which is going from pasta to rice pasta. There's a bulk, I practice in the south by Heritage McLeod, and there's a bulk barn right by there, and they have like half of bulk barn is things that I would never feed my worst enemy, and the other half is things that are just wonderful. It's a really good store that way. But they've got these big buckets of rice pasta and canned pasta and so forth. Bulk barn.
Yeah,
I think
breeding flowers too.
yeah, they do. They're just like quite often people go gluten-free and they really like baking. So what do? There's flour there. So,
Where did you say was located again?
there's one just south of Heritage on McLeod Trail.
There's one on the
And there's one on 32nd as well. I don't know the northeast as well. So yeah.
Southeast 130.
Yeah. So there's a few throughout the city, which is when I was in Toronto, they're everywhere. But when I came to Calgary, I'm like, oh. But no, they're opening up here again. So, second of which is removal of sugar. Some people can deal with sugar without consequences. I'm not one of them. But sugar is just one of those things that really does seem to mess everybody up to a greater or lesser degree. Getting rid of just refined sugar in your diet is something almost anyone benefits from. Aside from emergency things. Like if you're a type 1 diabetic, you probably need to keep a little bit around just in case. But for most other people, yeah, you just shouldn't be having it. There are some things that do seem to do better with people, like honey and maple syrup. But generally just, yeah, sugars. Again, I discussed that in my longer dietary talk on YouTube, so you guys can look out there if you're more interested in that. You have a question?
Yeah. Sorry, did you say that there were 3 ways to avoid gluten? You got to the rice and then...
Oh, I didn't. That's why I like having an audience. Ezekiel bread, rice pasta, gluten-free baking or gluten-free flours, and soy sauce. So instead of soy sauce, there's this other sauce called tamari. Yeah, because they make soy with wheat. Not as big a deal, but it's if you're really going for gold, then that was it. Tamari. Yeah, it tastes exactly like soy sauce, but they make it differently. Right.
They do have one with wheat, so be careful.
Oh yeah, just ingredients list.
They're labeled differently.
And the ingredients list in Canada are actually pretty good. In the States, they're extraordinarily deceptive. In Canada, they're actually okay. So if you go and look at the ingredients list and it says something, it's probably there. It's probably there or not there. So next, I'm not going to harp on this too much, but increasing your fruits and veggies. That is really, really excellent. Fermented foods. There's the next kind of 3 things are, when you look at cultures that live very long lives, they tend to actually all share these in their diet. The first of which is fermented foods, particularly fermented vegetables. Things like sauerkraut. You have to make this yourself because commercial sauerkraut is pasteurized. And the big thing about a lot of these fermented veggies is that they function as like food probiotics. They're usually fermented with lactobacilli. And lactobacilli, if you go into a probiotic store or a health food store and get probiotics, that's what they put in you. So that's one of the reasons why probiotics are one of the supplements that I don't mind putting on people on long term, because we do have a historical record of long term use of these informed fermented vegetables. There's a really good book on fermenting your own vegetables called Nourishing Traditions by Sally Fallon. $25 a chapters. Second food that traditional healthy cultures tend to eat, liver. I talked about that earlier. Get organic liver, just please. The liver is the organ that filters out toxicity, so if there's a conventionally raised cow that's full of antibiotics and everything else, that's all going to go through the liver. So, an organic cow is not going to be perfect, but it's going to be a lot better. So, and it's very easy to get liver, and I personally have it once or twice a week. So, the third food that's really excellent that traditional cultures have is bone broth. Bone broth is like, if you've got a slow cooker, take leftover chicken bones or leftover steak or lamb or whatever kind of meats you're having, throw them in a slow cooker, put in a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar, and leave it on for a couple of hours. The vinegar, or you could use lemon juice as well, kind of sucks the calcium out of the bones, and it complexes it with amino acids and fats, so it's really easy to absorb. And then you can make soup or rice or Some people just drink it straight. It's a really wonderful thing. And the last one is the Carroll Food Intolerance. Let's see. So you're all up to speed? Everything's pretty good? Questions? What?
What's that?
The Carroll Food Intolerance test? I'll get to that next. But anyone have any questions on what I've covered so far?
Is yogurt then considered a fermented food?
Yes. Not that crappy yogurt that's got all the sugary crap in it. If people really like sweet yogurts, buy plain yogurts and add honey. There is no way in hell you're going to add as much sugar as they add in commercially. So I've had to compromise with people that don't get the flavored yogurts. Just get regular yogurt. If you really like it sweet, add in honey yourself. Yeah.
What about the drink kombucha?
Kombucha is excellent. Excellent. I love it. I prescribe it to many people. It is also a probiotic, and I prescribe it to many people who just can't get over pop.
Where do you think?
Kombucha Safeway has it, and so does like community health foods and so forth. And it's like
What's
a
that spell?
KOMBUCHA, I think. Oh my god, see, my dad was an English teacher, and spelling and everything else is like the way I rebelled against him, so forgive me if I'm a little bit wrong. But it's truly excellent. I recommend the ginger flavor.
Did you say if someone needs to get off that they're hooked on Cokes?
Yeah.
That's what you do?
Bottled kombucha is more expensive, but it's fizzy, and it's sweet, but without having sugar. So it's really like if people are really hooked on like soft drinks, like replacing them with kombucha is really like the same sort of thing that they get. Yeah.
Is kefir dairy?
Kefir is dairy, yes.
Is dairy?
Yeah. Also a good choice. If you can deal with dairy, kefir's lovely. A lot of places have kefir now, so it's just a fermented dairy product. It's kind of like a fizzy drink, kind of. It's really nice. Yes?
What do you think about the right phenotype?
Oh, I actually I met Dr. Tadamo, who's an naturopath, a couple of times. Interesting idea. I haven't found, like, Dr. Tadamo gets very good results from what he does. I tried it. I generally give people the Carroll Food Intolerance test, and just general guidelines like these ones here, or general guidelines like these, and I tend to get very good results and have a lot greater compliance. But he's I don't know, sometimes you find this happening with medical practitioners. Sometimes people can make one thing work, and other people get nowhere with it. So that's kind of the situation. Some people do fabulously on their blood type diet, other people not so much. So that is my advice on that. And that may be because Dr. Tadamo has refined it recently. Instead of 4 blood types, I think he's got 7 phenotypes now, or 7 or 8 phenotypes now. So he tested me, and I'm a hunter, which yeah. So that may be part of the reason. Anyone else? Okay. So Carroll Food Intolerance test. It's a food sensitivity test. It's an in-office one that I do in my office. I favor it because it's got the longest history of use. It's been about 90 years now, and there have just been some incredible results among the naturopaths in the United States. So that's why I prefer
What's
it.
that first word or something?
Carroll.
C-A.
Carroll. Yeah. Dr. Otis Carroll was the man who invented it. So I use it because it's in office. You get the results right away. It's not $100 like any of the other food sensitivity tests are, and it doesn't change. It's a pretty good test. That's why I tend to favor it. There's a number of other tests. There's IgG tests, IgM tests, there's IgA tests, and so forth. They tend to be functions of what your body is absorbing into itself. So if you've got a lot of gluten in your diet, gluten shreds the inside of your intestines, so a lot of the food particles you're eating will make it into the bloodstream, and then the immune system will create antibodies to them. That's not a function of your food sensitivity, that's a function of how terrible your digestive system is. So in order to get a really good reading of that, you have to do multiple blood tests, and that adds up. So, yeah. Got something you'd like to share with the rest of us? You don't know what a food sensitivity test is? Oh, okay. It's a blood test, and they measure the. It's a blood test. It's a blood test, and they measure the amount of food the amount of antibodies to specific foods in your blood. Yeah, so it's a really good, it's a good measure of that, but how well it works out and how well it correlates to like real food sensitivities you have versus how much food you're just getting exposed to through other things is, that's a matter of debate right now. So, any questions on diet? Good. So, immune system therapies. There are 3 therapies that I really focus on that do a great deal of good work with the immune system. One of which, so you can see them right there. The immune system really is one of the big things we need in order to keep ourselves healthy. Things like cardiovascular disease, things like autoimmune disease, things like cancer are all functions of the immune system. So when we maintain it, those diseases become much less likely. So there's 3 big ones that I deal with, or that I treat in my own practice. First of which is focal infections. Focal infections are a very interesting thing. There's a great deal of literature on them from the 1700s to about the 1920s, and then they disappeared. They disappeared in medical literature in English. In German, they're still quite a big deal, and the German methods of treating them have been they're much more refined than the English-speaking methods, which is where most of the people are trained in. So focal infections are very interesting. It's more of a functional definition than a pathological one. It's not like you could cut open somebody and say, oh, there's a focal infection. There's a focal infection. Focal infections tend to be issues that just throw off the function of the rest of your body. They can literally be infections. I had one in my tonsil scars when I was a child, and I was only recently had it treated, and big shifts. I never want to talk for another day, but I had really big just shifts in terms of like behavior and in terms of my emotional stability and everything when I just got the infection in my throat treated. Quite often there's things like chronic scars that throw off the rest of your body. I had one person, we had her, we've done really good with her. She had ulcerative colitis. Got her off all of her meds. She was perfectly fine, but she still would have these occasional little bits of diarrhea. So I'm like, what is going on here? So I did some testing on her, and this is like in-office testing. It's a reflex testing method that I use. And eventually we discovered it was an ankle scar. Like she broke her ankle when she was a child, right before she got ulcerative colitis. So I did some acupuncture on the ankle, and I did acupuncture on the ear. Gone. Like that last little maybe 5% of getting the occasional attack of diarrhea was completely gone. So it's been good. Good 6 months now that's happened as well, so never happened before. Yes, I do acupuncture. I'm really good at ear acupuncture. I'm not as good at body acupuncture, but I still do it from time to time. So particularly, I'm really good at doing body acupuncture for focal infections, although that tends to be a bit more painful, so I tend to use ear acupuncture. Yeah. So it can be anything. It can be long-term infection, scars, dysfunction of the intestinal bacteria, root canals. Those ones I focus on a lot because I can't do much about them. Or tooth infections. Root canals really do tend to, there's a great deal of research that's being generated now on the relationship of teeth and chronic disease. And they haven't quite touched on root canals in the English literature yet. In German they have. So quite often I'll test these on people, and we'll do other therapies because I can't do much about a root canal. I refer you to the dentist for that. And then the root canal will become less severe, but quite often that's the issue. I actually had one person, she was a patient of mine, but she was a colleague of mine. She got cancer in the middle of naturopathic school, and naturopathic school is really hard. I can't even imagine how she did it, or how she dealt with that. But she did. She recovered, did chemo, did everything. She did wonderfully. And then one of our colleagues who was treating her gave her a homeopathic remedy called silica. And silica has this property of, when there's something in your body that shouldn't be there, and your body's healthy enough to deal with it, it will pop it out. So she took silica, lost 3 teeth. I was like, wow. I asked her later, did those all have root canals in them? She's like, yes, every last one had root canal. So her body did not want those in there. And I suppose it was a good thing for her. She avoided like $1,000 worth of surgery. So, Gonna have to speed up a little bit. Next one is mistletoe therapies. I really like this one. Mistletoe therapies are an injectable preparation of mistletoe that you just inject like you would insulin, just in the fat cell layer beneath your skin. It is extensively researched as a treatment for active cancer. Like it does seem to increase people's outcomes, help them deal with a number of other things, and as well decrease the incidence of cancer afterwards. There's some very basic research at the moment indicating that it can also prevent primary cancer, mostly in oncomice. So oncomice are mice that they've bred to have cancer very, very regularly. It does seem to decrease the incidence there. So it's a very interesting therapy. As it says on my slide, I'm going to have a cancer lecture upcoming on YouTube about this. Once yearly seems to be a professional consensus, and you do need a professional to inject this into you because if first of all, the company's very careful because they know how dangerous it can be. So they don't sell it to the general public. And second of all, like if you're allergic to it, you need someone there who can manage the allergic reaction. Oh, okay, you can't breathe now. All right, my friend. Here's some Benadryl and so forth. We're going to monitor you for 15 minutes. Okay, you're fine. We're not doing this anymore with you. So that needs to be done quite. It's a mistletoe preparation. So it's a special preparation nowadays, but it's incredibly effective. Like it's very good that way. So it was really interesting because originally it was used exclusively as cancer therapy, and then people started doing it like, oh, we did this for my cancer, but now my rheumatoid arthritis is going. We're not calling that much better. Now my ulcerative colitis is much better, and so forth. So it seems to function as like a reset button on your immune system to focus it away from where it shouldn't be focused on and towards what it should be focused on, i.e. cancers. I'll just be brief about this one. Your immune system is like a muscle. You need to exercise it. Quite often when we get sick, it's just in goes the aspirin or in goes the acetaminophen and shut off any hope of an immune response. Getting sick properly is one of the best things you can do to keep your immune system healthy. One of the most common etiologies for things that when I talk to people who've had cancer, one of the most common things is they didn't get sick for like 10 years. And when they do that, or when you do start treating them, all of a sudden, hey, Paul, I got bronchitis, I'm getting runny noses again, and I do my little happy dance, like, yay, you're having immune responses. So, yeah. So illness, and sometimes illness can be serious. That's why I usually have my patients call me, like, okay, I'm getting a bit of this, monitor them, and ensure that they're doing all right. This is the last one. This is, I think, the last topic. Yeah, that's the last topic we're gonna cover. The other one I don't think I have time for. Actually, no. Yeah, maybe do one or two more. This is, in terms of naturopathic medicine, is brand spanking new. This field is about 2 or 3 months old. Or not 2 or 3. A year or two old. It's called nutrigenomics. Nowadays, with the finishing of the Human Genome Project and sites and companies like 23andMe, you can get a complete readout of your genome for, like not complete, but like you can get a readout of about 900,000 potential mutations for about $150. Yeah. You can send this so if you do this, they'll send you a file of data. Excuse me, and they will be able to, and you'll be able to send this off to a couple of companies that will interpret this for you and tell you how your metabolism works and does not work. So I can't explain this terribly well, but and I know you all don't have this as a slide because it's copyrighted and you can't see it anyway. But so anyway, this is basically what I work with. Each of those little colored boxes is a gene, and you can tell by how well the gene is functioning, how well your metabolism is working, and you can correlate this with biochemistry. Like for instance, there's one. Oh god, I'm gonna go and stand up. So there's one mutation here that you can't really see that, but that's cysteine beta synthase. There's 2 potential problems with this one. The first of which is it can be overactive, so your body doesn't get enough homocysteine, because homocysteine, even though it does have negative health consequences when you have too much, you don't have enough. That's problem 2. Or it can be underactive, meaning you have too much. So if it's overactive, you would start supplementing SAMe, which is kind of up at the top there, so it turns into homocysteine. And if it's underactive, you would start supplementing pyridoxine, which helps that one do its job. I have one patient who very low homocysteine and very bad depression. So did the readout. He had the cystathionine beta synthase mutation that makes it really overactive. Started giving him SAMe. It's a miracle. It's wonderful. The big gene that people tend to focus on, and it's got this very suggestive title, MTHFR. I'll leave you to figure out what that's an acronym for. It's really methionine, or it's really methyl tetrahydrofolate synthase. Looks like a swear word. I think it's a swear word sometimes, but it's a really key genome. It makes the rest of those wheels kind of work together. I did it on I did this genome readout on a very violently autistic man who was 29, and he had actually one copy of the very severe mutation. It's MTHFR 667T, so we had one copy of that. I didn't think it was that severe, but I decided to start supplementing it anyway. So, in general, when you're doing nutrigenomics, you would either support the enzyme pathways that do something that cause make a particular biochemical reaction happen, or ultimately you directly supply the nutrient yourself. So I directly supplied him with methyl tetrahydrofolate, and in 2 or 3 days the violence stopped completely. There's a few psychiatrists who are starting to do this in the States, and they'll give people big doses, like 50 milligrams of methyl tetrahydrofolate. And I have no idea how they do that without people going crazy, because you get too much. But I started him on 1 milligram a day. So I am starting to do this a lot on people who want to figure out how to maximize their biochemistry for the rest of their life. And usually what I get, if people aren't dramatically ill, what I usually get from them is simply an increase in energy. So, mitochondrial health. All right, I'll skip those 2 last ones. Emotional and mental health. This is really, really critical. It's absolutely we tend to think in this society that if you are financially and materially well off, that you're happy. And I think it's weird because we all act as if that were true, but we all know that it's not. So one of the biggest things that I do with people is working in their mental and emotional health. I do emphasize meditation a lot. There's multiple different ways of meditation. It's not a religious thing, so it's not like you have to join a particular religion to learn how to meditate. That's one of my favorite books right there, The Path by Whitley Strieber. Whitley Strieber is a conspiracy theorist, I will tell you, but God knows why, he's written this absolutely incredible book about meditation. So, yeah. And second of all is a focus on making your life meaningful. What is it that you feel like you're here to do on the planet? What is it you feel like you want to do with the rest of your life? Are there any projects, memoirs, things you'd like to do? That's really important to get into touch with. One of the biggest problems I have with people, with my patients sometimes is, I'll ask them that. Like, Paul, I'm not happy with my life. I'm like, what do you want to do with your life? And they're like, well, I don't really know. I'm like, okay, that's a problem. And of course, love. Love is absolutely essential. Whether it's love of a pet, or a spouse, or humanity as a whole, or particular people in your life, it's really, really, truly important to cultivate that. I found this out because I am emphasizing that a lot more. I just went to Vancouver and I got to meet up with this friend of mine that I hadn't seen in high school, and I was absolutely in love with him. And it was just like, oh, I missed you so much, Peter. It's like, oh, I missed you so much too. So it's just kind of reminded me of how important it is to cultivate that in your life. A second component of a mental emotional health, and I know I'm going to go 1 or 2 minutes over time, is being stuck. Quite often people will find themselves having the same emotional reactions, the same problems in their life again and again and again. I refer to this as stuckness. Stuckness is a disease. It's quite a terrible disease because it just keeps you stuck in the same place forever and ever and ever. It's like you're always the kid who got beat on the playground, or always the abused wife, or you're always this person who's not ever being listened to, and so you feel like nobody's listening to you. And it can really stunt our emotional growth. I don't think stuckness is something that should happen to people. We should move through phases in life and different feelings and different deep core states. This is what we call this in natural medicine, the state. And the bad thing and what really frustrates me about stuckness is we tend to think that you need like years of therapy to overcome it, but you don't. Stuckness is a completely curable state. When I mentioned homeopathy earlier, that's what I use to cure this stuck feeling. I can have a talk with somebody in an hour and figure out where precisely they're stuck in life, and administer a remedy, and they're gone. I had I've got so many case studies, it's hard to pick one out of my mind. I had one patient she came to me, she was physically and sexually abused for most of her life. She just moved out of an abusive relationship, and she'd been so badly abused that she got sick and her kidneys a couple times, and she didn't have any kidney function left, so she was on dialysis. And she came to me this terrified little child, and I gave her a remedy, and the remedy I gave her was just her state was like, I will be whatever you want me to be, which kind of kept her in those abusive relationships. So I gave her a remedy called aluminum. Came back. It's like, I'm standing up straight. Oh, okay, this is wonderful. She's like, Paul, I feel 85% better. Like, I don't have to do that anymore. But now I just feel myself being really, really rigid. It's like, everything has to be my way and everything, which is quite a big improvement. So I gave her another remedy that has that state, gave her silica, and then she comes back. It's like a fully normal, I was amazed at this result. She comes back a fully normal person. She's having dreams of where she's processing all of the things that have happened to her, but she's coming back, and she, for the first time in her life, is no longer afraid. She doesn't wake up with a panic attack. She's happy. She's being able to move forward completely in her life, and I'm just so proud of how she's blossoming right now. So that's kind of what I'm talking about in terms of stuckness.